Hello, hello, and welcome everybody. Get yourself comfortable and situated. I'm Crystal Kaufman. I'm here with Woman Worth and Wellness. Welcome to Dancing in the Rain, How to Preserve in the Face of Adversity. Give a special thanks to our sponsors. Without them, all of our events are complimentary for you, and they wouldn't be possible without Mark Keeley, who we have on the phone here from Keeley and Associates. We have Paul Chapman with RBC Wealth Management, the Cheese Gallery, and the Georgian Hills Vineyard. Some amazing events happened at the Georgian Hills this summer, if you guys were lucky enough to attend. So without further ado, Nancy, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Crystal. Crystal is in Edmonton, and she is my virtual assistant. I couldn't do any of this without her. She is absolutely amazing. So if anybody needs some virtual assistant services, Crystal's available, and I'll certainly give her a great, huge vote of confidence. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for Women Worth and Wellness is Dancing in the Rain. Women Worth and Wellness is an inclusive and diverse brand. I highlight that because one person said, why do we have all these men speaking? And I said, this is an inclusive and diverse brand. I created it in 1994 when I was a private client wealth advisor with many clients who were women. The primary focus was to inform and inspire boomer women and their daughters on their optimum health and wealth, net worth and self-worth, philanthropy, legacy planning, and giving back on our communities. Women's health and wealth are both equally important for optimum net worth and self-worth, leading to prescient sharing through philanthropy, legacy planning, and giving back. So very much a personal circular mission for women's wellness. With COVID's impact, we have stock markets and housing markets booming with so much incredible wealth for so many. But also we have many who have been displaced with COVID. We're living in a time of extremes in so many ways where health has now become the #1 priority for us all, regardless of our wealth profile. We all want to be healthy, which we appreciate more than ever. No more taking it for granted. Excuse me. Today's event is focused on women's mental health, strength, wellness, and resilience, with women in particular having come through a very challenging time with COVID-19, which has had many setbacks, some of which we already know about. Since March 2020, we have moved from unprecedented to uncertainty, pivot to possibility, to lots of questions, with many, many questions for the road ahead. Masks forever, booster, gatherings, more work at home, back to the office, and in traffic, family and friends, wellness, travel, where, when, et cetera, et cetera. So many questions. So mental health, strength, resilience are the words we hear often. Good mental health is now a #1 asset for each of us to help us move forward positively and as confidently as possible. Mental strength and wellness matters more than ever. Often a crisis, like we are experiencing with this pandemic, reveals character versus creating it. So my intention with today's truly amazing guest speakers, and I think you'll agree after you hear their stories, Bob Ramsey and Chris Mcleod, is for you to be inspired by their incredible stories of living life with determination, to learn how to stay mentally strong yourself. Each of their stories is incredible. Now, I'm not sure, we were expecting Sandy Treliving from CAMH's Women Mind Initiative.
Yep, she just joined us. She just joined us.
Okay, well, perfect timing. Sandy.
Hi, Nancy.
Just one more thing. Before we begin, I want to credit today's theme to Beth, a very good friend of mine for a very long time, who gave me a small dish for my desk a long time ago with Vivian Greene's quote, "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning how to dance in the rain." So I hope you can see it.
Oh.
Indeed poignant for these times right now. Maybe Beth is also the weather person, because we have a whole pile of rain today for this special event. So the environment is truly enhancing our message. And as one guest said, we're all having fun jumping in the puddles. That's how we learn how to dance in the rain. So Sandy, over to you for 3 minutes or so to tell us about Women Mind.
All right, well, let's get started, Nancy. First of all, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I'm so sorry I didn't get to meet you, Chris and Bob, ahead of time, and I've got another meeting to jump to, but I've been on Women Mind calls since 8:45 this morning when I started with CHCH on a Skype, and then I moved to a Zoom, and then I moved to a WebEx, and then I moved to Zoom, and all good because I get to talk about mental health. And something that is near and dear to my heart. Started at a very young age being exposed with my brother who has schizophrenia and is 10 years older than I. So growing up in that home, just always knowing that I was going to get involved somehow, some way in the mental health world. And I landed at CAMH after doing a bunch of different things in the charity world, but always wanting to do something in mental health, but never really being inspired. A lot of grassroots that didn't really appeal to me from a standpoint of actually getting much done. And when I found CAMH, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, I just really loved everything that the hospital was doing. In case you don't know, that they are a teaching hospital, so a research focus. They train the most physicians in the country, public policy as well as part of the mandate. And the reach is really throughout Ontario with different virtual hubs and in-person hubs now, in-person hub now as well. Women Mind was born just before the pandemic started. And that really came about because we started doing a little bit more work in the world of, wow, women are really being impacted by the lack of research and the lack of funding when it comes to overall health, but mental health as well. So at CAMH, we started an initiative that our family has in the founding funders for. And it was very interesting because we brought in our group of daughters. So we've made this all about the women of the True Living family, giving, learning together, learning about philanthropy. So we have daughters and granddaughters that are involved. And it's been so impactful for our whole family. But we wanted to create a giving circle where more women would be wanting to join with us to learn and grow and support one another. So we've got this wonderful group that started. We just did a Women Mind Mixer earlier today. And we're introducing them to scientists that we have hired and brought on to Women Mind, talking about seed grants that we have issued already. The chair for, we're doing an international search currently. It should be announced probably by March. And, we're just really wanted to be impactful with our money so that we are supporting women in science, mentoring them within their careers, mentoring that next group of women in philanthropy, and researching the woman's brain and women physiology that has been underrepresented, under-researched, and underserved. So that's Women Mind in a bit of a nutshell. And we are really thrilled to be able to talk about it and to be able to bring the vision to light and include others, because it's so important when women get together to make change happen. And, Nancy, what you've done with your Women Worth Wellness group is fantastic. And, kudos to you. You saw the need there as well. And we need to stick together to promote and to fill those niches that are out there in our society. So if anyone wants to learn more, please go to camh.ca Women Mind and reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Crystal has put that up. And so by all means, but Sandy, the plan is, this is just a teaser. This is just the introduction. We know we want to spend a whole lot more time on this. And we all have heard about Carolyn Bennett's new post with her mental health focus. So I think this is just the beginning of what we will plan to do in 2022.
Oh, let's hope so. Let's hope
Right.
so. We need more money and going into research for everything. You know, like that's something that Canadians don't spend very much money on, or government of Canada doesn't spend very much money on. So we're really hoping to get that word out.
Perfect.
Thank you
Well,
so
it's
much.
women's empowerment with philanthropy. That's my next favorite topic. So we'll keep the conversation going.
All right.
Stay with us if you can. If not, we'll send you a recording. But
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. I've got another meeting to jump off to at 3:45.
okay, well, jump in the puddles on your way to it. I'm going to introduce
Thank you.
Bob Ramsey, and
Thank
what a great guy he is. I'm just going to briefly go through what's in his book. This is his book, as everybody can see. He is the president of the Toronto communications firm Ramsey Inc. and the founder of the speaker series Ramsey Talks. Bob does a newsletter, and when we do our recap, we're going to send you a sample. So you will see how prolific he is with everything that's going on in the world. It really is a delight when it comes into your mailbox first thing in the morning, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. He has had many leadership roles. He was the fundraising chair in the board of Toronto International Film Festival, an executive board member of the Canadian Film Centre. He's also served on many boards: St. Lawrence Centre, Women's College Hospital Foundation, International Festival of Authors, which he also chaired. He was awarded the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2015, the Bernier Medal from the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and he's also a member of the Explorers Club in New York. I'm telling you, if you had a year and a half to hear about all of his adventures, it still wouldn't be enough. Now, I have to tell you that I met Bob when I became a Jeans Marine. And I became a Jeans Marine because I heard his wife, Dr. Jean Memorial, speak about midlife crises. And that's like 25 years ago, or 20, whatever. And found out that she was a runner doing a marathon. So joined this whole initiative of Jeans Marines. And we did it at the running room on Yorkville. And what an experience. Anyway, Bob, here's my medal. Completed the Jeans Marines Marine Marathon Corps in 2003. And guess what? The date was October the 26th, 2003.
Wow.
So Bob was obviously, he was in the fast pack. I was pulling up the rear. And as I've often said, my husband always said, well, at least there were people behind you when you went over the finish line. The other thing I did, or Wayne and I did with Bob and Jean, was the Canadian Mountain Holidays outing, the heli hiking, which was fabulous. So Bob, over to you, untethered, unabridged, for 15 minutes. Tell us your fabulous story, which is amazing.
Well, thanks so much, Nancy, for that very kind and very generous introduction. The kindness and the generosity may clang a little with the tone of some of the things I'm going to talk about, but it's all the same pot of stew, really. So my memoir is called Love or Die Trying, and it's a story of seemingly endless personal calamity that carries on to this day, I must tell you. But it is also a story of great love and about the possibility of love later in life. So let me take you back to 2011. I was a marathon runner. I was fit. I was 60 years old. And I did a heart stress test. And 3 weeks later, I was having open heart surgery for a new aortic valve. And that surgery was a success. I mean, I was fit, I was comparatively young. And the next day, I died. My heart stopped, I was gone. And this is the classic, how did they get me back? Well, just like they do on TV with the paddles. I was dead for 2.5, 3 minutes. And so then it got worse after I died. I fell into a massive depression, which people tend to do, by the way, after they have open heart surgery. And despite the fact that I had all kinds of support, including from my doctor wife, I was going down a very bad spiral. But over time, I got better, and I called my literary agent, Michael Levine, and said, I want to write a book about my dying. And he said, Bob, publishers aren't interested in books about that, and certainly not 60-year-old white guys dying. But what's really unique about your life is not your death story, but your love story. Anybody who sees you and Jean for 30 seconds understands just what this is. And so that's what the book ended up being 10 years later. It took me 10 years to write the book. And in a way, thank heavens for COVID, because it gave me the time to do that. So before I continue, I just want to tell the story. I want to read for 5 minutes from the book, and I want to read about how Jean and I met. And it's interesting because we met courtesy of Carolyn Bennett, who until this morning was Canada's Minister of Indigenous Crown Relations, and as of right now is Canada's Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. And I think you will hear the obvious irony of what's going on. So this is a story of how Jean and I met. By the summer of 1990, my cocaine addiction ruled my life. I fought against it, but in the end obeyed its every command. I'd gone to my doctor a few months earlier to ask her for help. Dr. Carolyn Bennett was also my good friend. And one summer day, she called me to ask if I'd like to come up to her family cottage on Georgian Bay for the weekend. There'd be lots of people there, she said, and I might enjoy it. Her real motive, of course, was to keep an eye on me. Turning up at a big summer party was high-risk behavior for me, but I went because Carolyn would go crazy if I didn't. She might even force me to get help. Turned out that Carolyn had also invited another of her friends who deserved watching. Jean Marmorio had been her medical partner for 20 years, and a few months earlier, Jean had taken her 3 children away from their father and filed for divorce. Jean had come to the cottage with her youngest daughter, 9-year-old Mary Beth, and both had chosen to spend the day on a rock offshore, painting pictures of the island Carolyn's cottage was on. Later that afternoon, Carolyn got a phone call from Doug Barrett, the neighbor 1 island over. Doug had just bought a brand new powerboat and wanted us all to join him for a test ride. He told her he'd be over to pick us up in 10 minutes. Did I want to go? Not a chance. Doug Barrett was a good friend of mine, and I knew he'd sense there was something wrong with me, so I opted to stay at the cottage with the kids while all the other grown-ups joined him. All except Jean and her daughter, of course, who were still off painting on the rock. The others said they'd be back in an hour, and off they headed across the water. They were soon just a speck on the horizon. 1 hour passed, then 2. They must be having fun out there, I thought. By 7:30, Jean and her daughter had returned to the cottage. Where is everyone? She asked, realizing I was the only adult there. On Doug Barrett's new boat, I said. They said they'd be back a while ago. We'd better make the burgers, she said, opening the fridge. We started getting dinner ready, though my skills in that department were non-existent. I introduced myself as a patient of Carolyn's. I know who you are, she said. Years later, Jean would tell me that we'd actually met half a dozen times since I'd become a patient of their practice. I just never remembered her. Jean also told me that Carolyn had asked if she could give me a ride up north that weekend. Carolyn was worried that I would cancel at the last minute or kill myself on the highway if I drove while I was high. Jean had told her Bob Ramsey is mad, bad, and dangerous to know. no thank you. And thus began our relationship. But I knew none of this that Saturday evening on Georgian Bay. In fact, Jean seemed quite civil as we prepared the hamburger patties for dinner. So I'm going to stop there. That's the very abbreviated story of how we met. In other words, we met in the worst possible circumstances. There was no magic across the crowded room. There was nothing. But somehow this doctor fell in love with a drug addict who eventually did get treatment and got better. And I'm now 31 years clean and sober. And we have cobbled together a marriage and a family later in our lives. I'm now 72, Gina's 79. But in the intervening years, that kind of, and I'm just timing myself here, that kind of craziness didn't stop. So both of us have had a number of near-death experiences. Jean finished the Boston Marathon 10 minutes before the bombs blew up at the finish line. She, 3 years later, was rushed into emergency intestinal surgery. I have had bladder cancer and other health scares. And it's interesting because, so, you know, in other words, death is never far away. And it's been brought up incredibly close to both of us because Jean, who's a family practitioner, shifted her practice 6 years ago to start becoming a MAID doctor, MAID medical assistance in dying. So she is constantly, I mean, not only with people who are dying, this is not palliative care, she is actively dispatching them. And so death is an ever-present part of our lives. And yet we remain, as they say in AA, happy, joyous, and free. And that's a kind of a characterological thing. As I said, I mean, I am a recovering cocaine addict. I've suffered from mental health issues. And lots of people have said, Bob, you're incredibly resilient, etc. I think if you ask truly resilient people, and I know I was talking with Chris about this before, they don't go around saying, I'm resilient. And nor do I get up in the morning saying, I'm going to practice resilience. I think we just kind of carry on because we have no choice. So it's an interesting incident that happened during COVID that brings all this stuff about love and death and disease sort of streaming together in one kind of giant conflagration. I am in Jean's will and Jean is in my will, and I have the medical power of attorney for her and she does for me. In other words, I can pull the plug on her and she can pull the plug on me if we're coming to the end. And during the early days of COVID, when we had fled to our cottage on Georgian Bay, and we were hearing all these reports, you may remember them, of not enough ventilators and older people dying. Of course, there was no vaccine in sight at that time. And doctors maybe having to triage people. Jean was just saying to me, well, I've got to tell you, if I get pretty sick, I'm not going to ask for a ventilator, and that'll kind of be the end. And I was shocked to hear this. I said, honey, you're a doctor. I'm sure they'll put you at the front of the line. You know people. I'm sure you'll get a ventilator. And she was not prepared to listen to any of this. Jean was raised on a farm. She believes deeply and profoundly in the fairness of the healthcare system. And I heard her and I said, yeah, well, you can believe deeply and profoundly in it, but I don't want you to die because of it. And over the next 2 days, we had the most extraordinary fight we've ever had in our lives. And I was terrified that my wife, my great love, who gives so much meaning to my life, was going to die because she wanted to play the game fairly. And I just couldn't understand this. And she asked me, she said, so if I'm really not conscious and I've got COVID, and you know my wishes, are you going to carry them out? And I said, no, I'm not. No, I'm going to find that ventilator for you. And the next day she called her doctor and great friend, Mary Rubino, and she changed, she basically fired me and brought on Mary in my place. And I have never felt so abandoned in my life. But of course, when you think about it, she was dealing with a different reality from mine. I was dealing straight up out of fear. And her attitude is, at age 70, 78 at the time, I've led a good life and let the fates and the system play themselves out. So that really was an extraordinary kind of break, which we survived. But I guess the message I have, and I get a sense from Nancy that messages don't just come in kind of stories, but need to come in kind of lessons that we all need to pin on the wall, and I certainly believe in that. But I think this won't be a surprise to any of you that the message I'm here to give is, despite all kinds of chaos in the first part of your lives, at age 40, I was a cocaine addict. You can rescue the second part of your life. You can rescue the last year of your life if you want. It's never too late to be happy. So that's what I have to say. I hope you buy the book. It's called Love or Die Trying. And Nancy, thank you for having me on.
I think you're amazing. And of course, I only knew the last 20 years and I didn't know the first, how many was that, 80 years? No, I'm sorry.
Right.
But the first part of your life, what an adventure. I mean, on all sorts of ups and downs and ins and outs and, like everybody's life. And, that's what I love about you is you don't stop. You just keep on going. It's like, okay, what's next?
Right.
And the story with Jean is amazing, truly amazing. So thank you so much. And of course, if we do a more in-depth focus on mental health and wellness in the new year, by all means, come back and we'll work with Carolyn Bennett and we'll bring it all together.
Good.
Help people be
Wonderful.
strong.
Great. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you. Okay, stand by. Where's Mark Keeley? Mark, I want you to introduce Chris. And Mark is somebody that, I don't know how many years I've known you. He was John Turner's right-hand man. And of course, I was heavily involved in liberal politics at one point in time. And that was how I met Mark. And a super guy. And together, the two of us have worked on different things and we'll continue to do some things. Mark is the person who introduced me to Chris. And Chris is a gem. He's just unbelievable. And like Bob, it's like they live their lives with determination and joy against the odds. So over to you, Mark.
Well, thanks, Nancy. And I'm just so delighted to be able to introduce my great friend, Chris Mcleod. But I do want to say before I begin that I'm a huge fan of yours, Nancy. And I absolutely adore the work you're doing with Women Worth and Wellness. It's spectacular. To sort of quote Bob, you're my addiction. So I think that's great. And I'm just delighted to be associated with you. Look, I'm here to introduce Chris Mcleod, my great friend. Imagine that you're at your office and you receive a phone call from a friend you've known forever. And in a garbled voice, you hear on the other end a friend whom you've known, as I said, forever and ever and ever. And I asked, Chris, are you okay? And he says, Mark, I can't breathe. I'm in the ICU at St. Mike's. I need your help. What's the problem? Because I need you. This is an exact story. Chris said, I need you to get hold of the Prime Minister and get this drug on the formulary for me. So I thought, jeepers, how are we going to do this? I ended up calling the Prime Minister at the time. It was Stephen Harper. We got the Prime Minister mobilized and the entire government of Canada mobilized to get this drug to Chris Mcleod, and it saved his life. Chris Mcleod has been a friend of mine forever. He is a living, breathing example of somebody who is a saint on earth. Chris has cystic fibrosis. For all intents and purposes, he should not be alive. But God and Chris's determination and his ability to be resilient has given not only us as friends of his, but the world the benefit of having Chris around. I'm lucky I come from a large family, but Chris is one of those people whom I not only call my brother, but I can tell you he is as much of my family as all of my family. Chris, to quote Bob Ramsey too, Chris pivots when he needs to, and he understands the notion of possibility. His book, Beating the Odds, is a great read, and I encourage everybody to get it after this. It is my distinct and unbelievable privilege to introduce my great friend and my colleague, Chris Mcleod. Chris, all the best.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Nancy. I'll jump right into it because I know we're going to be pushing against the clock and we want time for questions. So when I was born in 1969, life expectancy for someone with CF, it's a genetic condition, was 4 years old. It was a pediatric condition because no one lived outside of childhood. But as new medicines came on the market, and Canada has had at the time, in particular the 70s and the 80s, a great system of access to medications. Life expectancy went from 4 to 8 to 12. I'm a lawyer, just like law school, I sort of rode the curve. So I was always a year above the expectancy rate. So I think now it's 50, I'm 52, so I'm still ahead of the curve. I was in and out of hospital to treat because you get a lung infection, you have to go on intravenous antibiotics. So kids end up being in and out of the hospital a lot. Pan to 2012. I'm 42 years old, and my lung function by this point had plummeted below 30%. I went into St. Mike's Hospital, so June 2012, and there's a new medication out now. It's called CFTR, it's gene modulator therapy. They've actually discovered a way to normalize the genetic defect that is CF. So I go into the hospital. We don't know this at the time that I go into the hospital about the gene modulators. But we try every antibiotic medication known to mankind, or humankind. And by the end of July, early August, nothing's changing. We're at 32%. I'm still on 4 liters of oxygen. Weeks and weeks go by, nothing's moving. At this point, we have to start getting ready for pre-assessment for a lung transplant, which is the alternative. Either you might expire or you get a lung transplant. Well, Dr. Elizabeth Tullis, who is the lead respirologist at St. Mike's and my doctor, she's a phenomenal individual. She came into my room September 22nd and said, Chris, good news and bad. Good news, you have a rarer form of CF, and there's a company out of Boston, Vertex, that has this medication that will normalize it. It's not yet approved in Canada. A few days ago at the FDA, it was approved. Your situation is so severe, the company will give it to you on compassionate grounds. We just have to get it across the border. There was a special access program in Ottawa, which would allow a company to give a medication on compassionate grounds, even if it's not approved by Health Canada. But you had to be in a life-threatening situation, imminent death as a possibility, and there was no other alternatives. We checked all the boxes except for one. You had to have it for a limited use, like a chemotherapy. Government denied it. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out what we're going to do. And of course, Mark tells the story when he called, but another call. And Mark, thank you and Doug Ganweiler and so many other people have been phenomenal. I was supposed to have a meeting with John Godfrey. And of course, I couldn't go because I'm on IV antibiotics. Called him to cancel the lunch. Bob and I were reflecting on this. He said, oh, Chris, you've got to get in touch with Carolyn Bennett. So Carolyn Bennett and her office, she was the health critic at the time in Ottawa, were involved. So we had an army of people working to get this medication, for which I'll always be grateful. Within 10 days, the decision was overturned in health. There was the prime minister or the minister at the time, all were involved, and it was overturned. I got access to this drug, Kalydeco. My lung function went from 30 to 60% within days. So that's 2012. I've been back at work and doing well ever since. But while I was in the hospital, one of the dark days, I was there for 4 to 5 months, went in June, and then got out in early November of 2012. A doctor had said to me, Chris, you've got a unique approach. You got to tell me what your secret is. So I jotted down 12 points at the time. This is in 2012. And I handed them over to him and sort of left it and sat on it. That's the essence of the 11 lessons to overcome a health crisis. I passed it on to this doctor. So now pan to the pandemic. Everyone is, as we all have suffered and seen the horrendous consequences of COVID. When I was sitting at my house in lockdown with like everyone else, I thought, well, gee, CF has some eerie similarities to COVID. It affects the lungs. People with CF, there's a bug we can get, and we only can get it from other people with CF. So we have had to stay 6 feet apart for 30 years. Whenever CF people are in the same room, if we're ever in the same room, we've had to wear masks, stay 6 feet apart. So much of this was not new to people with CF. And so I thought, gee, I may have something to offer, in terms of my own experience. So I wrote the 11 lessons to overcome a health crisis and lead a resilient life. And that was beating the odds, because since I've been on Kalydeco, I've managed to, and I had a huge blessing with so many people coming out to help out and make sure I got the drug. So obviously I have an equal obligation to make sure everyone else with CF gets on these gene modulators. Little did I know when we took on that battle to access gene modulators in 2012, that it would be an odyssey that actually just ended last week. We now have all the CF gene modulators are available in every province on the public formulary, including the Yukon territories. We just have Nunavut and the Northwest Territories that haven't yet signed on, but people in Canada can now get them. So, and I just want to tie in, Nancy, to the women, worth and wellness, because when you look at, I may be a male speaking here, but my entire team that put me back on the ice are women. Dr. Elizabeth Tullis, 4 of the 5 doctors, my doctors, Dr. Stevenson, Dr. Anand, Dr. Elizabeth Tullis, are all phenomenal female doctors. The nurses on the ward, about 95% of the team that stuck with me, including the respirologists and the pulmonary medicine, it was all incredible women who helped get me to the finish line. And so when we've been working on accessing over the last 7 years, these gene therapies, and I speak about this in the book, we needed I was already on the drug. So I wasn't a good example of someone who needed the drug. Every single voice in those early years, and I give in Beating the Odds, tell their stories. It's 6 young women. And when I say young, There's Ella, who's 12 from Regina. Cassidy, who's I think 14 now in Saskatoon. Victoria, 17 in Toronto. Maddie Vanstone, who was the real face of the campaign in the early years, who was at the time, I think, 10 years old. The two people who stood up, Lilia and Melissa in British Columbia, when we launched a class action for violation of the charter for failure to provide access for these medications. So as I was reflecting on what to talk about today in terms of telling people about the 11 lessons, it struck me. The entire team, particularly spearheaded Dr. Elizabeth Tullis, is a rock star when it comes to respirology. For her to have rooted through, and I know because her office, I was on Ward 6B at St. Mike's 4 months. Her office was at the end of the hall. And when I was so desperate to get this drug, I used to go to find out when she was arriving and when she was leaving to see if she'd had any updates. If you wanted to catch her, you better be there by 6:30 in the morning or 10:30 or 11 at night. And that would be on a Saturday or a Sunday around the clock. And she's the one who made the discovery that I had the 551 gene type, convinced Vertex Pharma to give it to me on compassionate grounds. I became the first person in Canada to go on this gene modulator and have had incredible success. After, I think it's 7 years now, access has been secured for everyone else. But just pivoting back to the 11 lessons. So throughout all these years, whether it was growing up as a kid with this health challenge, which I frankly was never really preoccupied by. I viewed it more as a nuisance. And, you see the posters on the buses about kids dying because they wanted to do hard advertising to raise some funds to find a cure back in the 70s and 80s. But it never really got the better of me. I just didn't think much of it. But my 11 lessons, and the one I go through with these 6 incredible advocates, you control your response to whatever happens to you, regardless of what it is. Living in day-tight compartments. Don't worry about the past, don't worry about the future. Easier said than done, but you need to have dominion over that day. Power of prayer, praying yourself and having others pray for you. Never give up. Are a few of the chapters, just to give you a bit of a flavor of it. Get up, dress up, show up. Even if you're in a hospital bed with nowhere to go. I get up every morning, wash myself in the sink, make the bed, go out at the time, even though it was very challenging. This was pre-COVID. Go out for a cup of coffee across the street, which took everything out of me because I had to take the oxygen off. But it's still, you come back and the day, and maybe you just go right back to bed because you are sick and you need to. So I go, in each of the lessons, I give a personal anecdote from the hospital setting, primarily, or as in, you control your response. I talk about these 6 incredible women who came forward and lent their voice, which are incredible and powerful stories. Each one could take a book itself. Power of smiling and laughing. When all else is falling around you, never underestimate that. And just another incredible influence and source of strength getting through that was my mother, who I think is on this call today, Joan Liddington. So Dr. Tullis comes into my room September 22nd, 9 a.m. That Sunday, day before, my mom calls me and she says, "Oh, Chris, I have been praying for you day and night. Everyone else is." And she goes, "I just know something amazing is going to happen this week. There is no reason we didn't know about the gene therapy." I said, "I hope you're right, Mom. We'll just keep focused, stay positive." So, and she says, "No, Chris, I'm not kidding. I am certain." The next morning, 9 a.m., Elizabeth Tullis walks in and says, "Chris, good news and bad. Good news, drug, we can get you the drug. Bad news is it's $300,000 a year and it's not approved," and we get it. So that's the story. Now, see, even if you're on a gene modulator, you can still end up back in hospital. And I did during COVID, but this time it's not a life sentence, death sentence. You can get out again. And I'll close off on this, because when I was putting this book together, and my good friend an ally on all this whole journey has been Doug Anweiler, who's helping me with it. So the day the book was being sent to me, we're about to ship it off to the printer, I'm actually in the same room that I was in 2012. But this time I was healthy enough, I just needed the IV antibiotics for 2 weeks. So I get in, now under COVID, no one can get in the room and you can't get out. They said, Chris, you need a picture for the back of the book. I said, well, what do we do? No one can come. He goes, just take a selfie, we'll crop the picture. So on the back of the book, I don't know if you see it, that is me in the exact same chair, in the exact same room I was in on death row in 2012. Except this time, I could get out, and I did. So the lessons are really just anecdotes behind a lesson I've kind of adopted and wanted to share during the pandemic because it's helped me fare through some challenging times. And hopefully, if anyone else is facing particular health challenges, I hope it'll be helpful.
Chris, tell us about Never Better.
Never better. So that's another one of the rules, and I picked that up from my dear friend Dennis Mills, who was a member of Parliament on the Danforth for, I think, 15 or maybe 18 or 20 years. And Never Better is, it's 2 words. It's this nice, tight, crisp way of letting everybody know that you're bringing your everything to the game. If someone says to you, how are you doing? Always reply, never better.
Never better.
And it'll say, you mean you've never been better than you are now? Well, that's my intention to try to be. It, especially in a hospital where everyone's not doing well, including yourself, it allows everyone to pause and it affects them in a positive way, whether they know it or not.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So I've used it as an underlying philosophy.
Good for you. For everybody who's here listening to Chris's story, he is an accomplished litigator. So in order to get to that point, he is extremely well educated. I'm not going to go into his whole background, but really to have dealt with and come through everything that you have at the same time dealing with your health is unbelievable. And I'm just so glad that I've gotten to know you. When I talk to other people about you, they say that you have a wicked sense of humor.
Well,
so we have to experience that sometime.
I've got a few funny stories I tell in the book, in the hospital. Yeah. I mean, really, the hospital stay is endless material for a Seinfeld episode. I mean, you're walking around half naked. People are poking and prodding you. It's very entertaining. You can laugh. Believe me, I've got a lot of great laughs in the hospital.
Okay, I'm going to turn it to Crystal. Crystal, are there some questions there that we can put to these guys? Maybe Bob can come back.
Yeah, we'd love to have our speakers back. There isn't really any questions, but there's really some great stories, especially Trudy shares about her rare blood disorder, Chris, and so it's the parallels into both of your lives. So if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat for either of our speakers and we'll be happy to ask them. But Trudy says, yes, that's life, and at least I'm alive. So how true that anything that if you've read that, Chris, anything that you have to comment on that?
Solaris. I've heard of Solaris, and I know there was a big fight to get it. It's approved in Canada, paid for in 2010. I'll make this comment. First of all, that's a great story, Trudy. I'm glad you're doing well, and you're still in the game of life. It's incredible. Access to medications, I had no idea in 2012 how challenging it is. Layered in bureaucracy, the system does need to get tidied up so the people who are already focusing on their health don't have a secondary role of being a first-tier political advocate for a change as well. But thanks for sharing that, Trudy.
Chris, another question. My good friend Beth that I mentioned, she was VP at Dundurn, and that's who published Bob's book. But tell us about getting your book published.
Oh, well, I had no idea how it really worked. And so I written to, I think it was Friesen Press or one of these published houses. And they said, well, we might be able to look at this at 2023. I said, oh my gosh, this was in April. I said, I was thinking more about June. So I said, I'll just do it myself. So I'm from Saskatchewan originally, so we set up Big Sky Publishing. I registered the name, and we hired an editor, and you only write one book in my life, I assume. So I said, let's just go all out and see how it goes. So yeah, Big Sky Publishing is housed at the office of Cambridge LLP, my firm.
Excellent, excellent. Bob, have you got some stories? I just want to also share with the group that when we had our practice run for today, neither Chris nor Bob knew one another.
Yeah.
And of course, these guys come on, and it's amazing the commonality that they have without really knowing. One is Carolyn Bennett in particular,
Yeah.
in terms of Bob's life, but also Chris's life. And I was thinking, this is why I do what I do, because meeting these great people and hearing the challenges that they have worked their way through. And my best people are people who are generous and people who have a sense of humor. And I'm telling you, you guys are shooting the lights out on both accounts. Bob, you didn't.
Bob, you're on mute.
Bob, you're on mute.
There we go. So Nancy and Chris and others, I do have a how was your publisher experience? So my publisher, Dundurn, has been very good at getting me publicity, which is crucial. But my best publisher story and kind of the real state of publishing, because there are many authors in this world, took place a few years ago when, as part of my Ramsey Talk series, I was hosting Malcolm Gladwell and Roger Martin together.
Wow.
And I think pretty much everybody knows who Malcolm Gladwell is. Roger Martin was the dean of the Rotman School at the U of T and one of the world's great management thinkers. And we were sitting in the green room beforehand, just chatting away. What's interesting about these two guys is that they both went to the same one-room schoolhouse in St. Mary's, Ontario, both of them. And they're both great friends, right? Because they went to school together. And they also both have the same publisher, St. Martin's Press out of Boston. And they, like authors anywhere, were complaining about their publisher. And I had them because they both had new books, right? And Malcolm Gladwell turned to Roger Martin and said, you know, if things don't improve, I'm going to have to start selling my books out of the trunk of my car. This is Malcolm Gladwell saying this. And I sat there thinking, wow, that must be pretty bad. Maybe I should call the people at St. Martin's and tell them. But of course, the real truth of this is authors always like to talk this way about their publishers. Okay. So Chris, you saved yourself a whole bunch of horror stories by publishing yourself.
Crystal.
Thanks, Bob. There was a question.
Yeah.
Both Bob and I about words of wisdom. The two things I think you do, one or two things to recommend to push past adversity if people are feeling it right now, I think is the question.
Well, so very briefly, mine is, and it's interesting because I went to a treatment center in Atlanta that is primarily for doctors and lawyers and judges and airline pilots, people who have a license, but it's also heavily AA based. In other words, Alcoholics Anonymous. In other words, not very scientific. So here you have these scientists and you have an unscientific treatment thing. And they have something, and AA floats on sayings, right? On sort of pithy sentences. And that's because when you join AA, you're generally sort of incoherent and hardly able to stand up. And so if one sentence can keep you going, that's enough. And they say things like, you know, when the train runs you over, it's not the caboose that kills you. But the most enduring line that all kinds of people in AA would know is one day at a time. And one day at a time is a little mental trick, which is things are bad, things are awful. Oh my God, it's just dreadful. but if I can just get through today, it'll be okay, right? I don't have to stay off drugs for the rest of my life. I just have to stay off drugs today.
Okay.
I don't have to
Perfect.
kill myself, right? Today. And even though we know that's a trick, right? You wake up the next day and you say, here I am. And it gets you through the bad parts. So Chris, over to you.
Bang on. And one of the lessons I wrote about was live in day-tight compartments, which, Bob, is really what you just said.
Yeah.
You can't worry about the past, can't worry about the future. And the other one is get up, dress up, show up, even if you've got nowhere to go. Like, I'm on IV, I'm in the hospital. Get up, roughly make the bed.
Right. Yeah.
And then put on clothes and act as though I used to get fully dressed. Half the time I'd put on my suit, even though I had no one to meet other than the staff, because it sends a message to everyone around you that you are in the game. And the other piece that follows from daytime burns, get up and dress up. You never know where you're going to catch some momentum. All of a sudden, you've made your bed, you're having a cup of coffee, and then start trying to solve somebody else's problem. And in so doing, you're engaged in life. And when that happens, you will find momentum from the most unlikely place.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay, well, you guys are terrific. It's 4:27, so I guess we should wrap it up. One person is interested in publishing, so maybe we can arrange something separately.
For sure.
Well, we can send your contact info and they can reach out to you directly.
Yeah, happy to.
But I just want to say a huge, huge, huge thank you. You guys are amazing. Women Worth and Wellness is an inclusive brand. That's why we have guys sharing their stories about living your life and with determination and joy. I mean, you guys are incredible. We will send a recap tomorrow, highlighting the 2 books. Here they are. Each one is like $20. My advice is buy them if you can, read them, and then pass them on, because they both have incredible stories with humor, but great, great, great advice to help us all get through all these challenging times and move forward into the future with a lot of positivity and great confidence. So thank you again. In terms of what's happening next, the month of November, we're really focusing on women's empowerment through philanthropy, a couple of events, and certainly everybody in our database will let you know. But Chris and Bob will have to get you back again. Bob, you didn't say, I think you should, well, we better not. I was going to say, what was Jean's response when you said, as a woman, what do you want?
Well, very briefly, the story was about what kind of man are you looking for? You're recently divorced, you're single. And invariably women say, I'm not looking for a rocket scientist or a billionaire. I'm just looking for someone who's kind, who will make me laugh. And every woman says that. And I asked Jean Marmorio this, and this was this first time we met, and she said, I'm looking for a man who's got a lot of money and a lot of power, who loves sex. And she terrified me with that. She scared the crap out of me. And I thought, she's different. so that was part of the story.
Well, that's terrific. On that note, we will end it with a good smile, and you guys keep going and keep shooting the lights out. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thanks, Crystal, always for all your great help.
Hey, thank you,
Great.
Nancy, Bob, and Mitch, Fraser, and Doug Anweiler, who I also see are here. Terrific.
Excellent. Very good. Perfect.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
This is,
Great. I loved it.
I always think of Prince Philip. He used to just close it. It was over. Like you just shut the computer
Oh.
down.
Okay, take care.
Thanks so much,
Okay,
everybody.
you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.